Fact is that there are more slums that Negroes are living in the United States of America today than there were 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Fact is that the Negro is more hovered up in ghettos today, more segregated in housing today than 20 years ago. The fact is that schools, particularly in the North, are more segregated today than they were in 1954 when the Supreme Court rendered its decision outlawing segregation. These are the hard facts. I'm not trying to solve these problems. We've got to rise up. We've got to organize. We've got to mobilize. And we've got to work to solve these problems.
Well, it was a very controlled exercise. We were told what time to come into town, where we could march, where we could not march, the kinds of signs that we could carry. The speakers were told what to say. When you say the March on Washington, you get the perception that people are coming there angry or they're going to do something. It was a picnic. The final thing was we heard Dr. King's I Have a Dream. So everybody was emotionally clapping and so on. I felt quite sad as I looked at the people because it was an empty dream to me.
America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. The idea whose time has come today.
I had responsibility for protecting his life on the march from Selma to Montgomery, and I spent 5 or 6 absolutely sleepless nights down there. I'd drive back and forth from Selma to Montgomery, and I'd look at every tree and around every corner and wonder, and up on the roof and wherever any sniper could be, because I could feel the hatred drawn toward that place that wanted to kill him. And we had identified about 1,200 people who had histories of personal racial violence. I mean, they had tried to kill, they had assaulted, or they had murdered people on account of race, as far as I know, all whites, killing blacks. And here they were coming. They were drawn like a magnet towards Selma to Montgomery. And the man walked in the valley of the shadow of death for years. And he feared no evil.
There were a lot of lynchings and things that were going on that you never heard about because the news never left the South.
And the federal government had taken a larger position of standing by and observing what was going on. The FBI was not doing anything to protect the rights of the people who were peacefully demonstrating.
When you say power structure, I know you mean the white power structure because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so.
Blacks being beaten with baseball bats and the fire hoses and the dogs being sicked on blacks, marchers and protesters and people who were trying to vote. It was a very bitter pill to accept.
If you only ask for crumbs and the granting of those crumbs causes bloodshed, what do you think will be caused when you ask for a loaf of bread or a bakery in which to bake your own bread?
Well, let me continue with...
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
There had been a very intense struggle around the question of denying black people the right to vote and access to public accommodations. And the South had been the focus of much of that struggle because that's where the contradictions were most blatant.
As long as the masses of black people are involved in the struggle for freedom, not integration, but freedom, and respect as human beings, respect as men, and show that they're willing to die to be respected as men, then the power structure sits up and takes notice.
Dr. King's a man of unparalleled nonviolence among public figures in American history. And he studied nonviolence, and he studied Gandhi, and he studied Tolstoy. He studied Thoreau, and he absorbed their vision. And he came to understand that it was the only way that we'll avoid destroying ourselves. He could look at Hiroshima, and he could look at our massive arms expenditures and how it starved people and blew their bodies apart and all the misery of it. You could look at soaring crime rates, and he knew we couldn't go on like this, and he pleaded with us.
Hoover felt that one way maybe to silence Martin Luther King would be to invite him to his office.
J. Edgar Hoover said that Martin Luther King was a liar, and Martin Luther King had accused him of being racist in his selection of FBI agents. So Martin Luther King said, I will go to Washington and I will have it out with him. I will certainly make him take that back and apologize to me. And then he did come to see J. Edgar Hoover. And they went down the hall and walked in an office together to talk. Finally, I inquired, and they said Martin Luther King had gone out of the door on the other side and had left. Something
Influenced Martin Luther King, because I understand that at the end of the conference he told the press that I think something to the effect that Hoover was a great man.
J. Edgar Hoover. The King was horrified, and that Hoover had accomplished his aim of shutting up Martin Luther King for the time being.
Martin Luther King, poor boy, is under the influence of the foxes. I should say under the control of the foxes, and has been used by the foxes to lead the poor sheep right to the slaughter.
Malcolm was not afraid to speak the truth, and this was an eye-awakening to people in general. I think even some of the whites started to see some things they could not see before.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label is under the influence of the foxes. I should say under the control of the foxes, and has been used by the foxes to lead the poor sheep right to the slaughter.
Malcolm was not afraid to speak the truth, and this was an eye-awakening to people in general. I think even some of the whites started to see some things they could not see before.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling, and you take him for a friend.
They falsely accused Malcolm X of being violent, which Malcolm X did not, because all he taught people was self-defense. And self-defense doesn't mean you go out and attack someone, but you do have the right to defend yourself by any means necessary if you're in that position to defend yourself.
Malcolm, to us, represented a voice.
Why should the black man need some legislation to prove that he's a human being, when you don't need any legislation to prove that whites are human beings? So I make this point because, to come right back to my initial statement at the outstart of the program, you will never get real freedom and recognition between black and white people in this country without destroying the country, without destroying the present political system, without destroying the present economic system, without rewriting the entire Constitution. It'll be a complete destruction of everything that America supposedly stands for before a white man in this country will recognize a black man as something on the same level with himself.
Heads of governments and leaders of revolutionary movements listened to him and were convinced that there was a legitimate problem, a human rights problem that black people had in the United States, which was being covered up and concealed.
He hated all the things that decent people should hate. He hated racism and hypocrisy and oppression and the tyranny of those in power. And what he loved humanity. But of course, the humanity in this country, because of the racism, was not the kind of humanity that anyone could love. It would have to be a society that would have to be changed completely.
And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
The beast finished Malcolm. They had to get rid of him. After Malcolm was assassinated, I was at the Audubon Ballroom the day that it happened. It was a terrible thing to witness. And there are a lot of things that happened there that day that I don't understand, and a lot of questions that have not yet been answered. People are still trying to puzzle out or piece together what really happened and who was really responsible in terms of the actual participants. We know that the United States government planned it, did all of the plotting, and used the Nation of Islam and some of Malcolm's own people to bring him down.
I found out later on, after research, that Gene Robbins was on the stage when Malcolm X got assassinated. He was a gold badge carrying detective. If you define what a bodyguard is, it's distinctly just that. You guard somebody's body with your body, and that makes you a bodyguard.
Malcolm's assassination, 2 of the people arrested for the murder of Malcolm X were people that had not fired a shot that had hit the victims.
These activities were run by the counterintelligence staff of the CIA. It was put in counterintelligence in order to bury it as deep as possible within the agency and prevent exposure.
I find it a little strange that the FBI has informant files on so many people who end up assassinating someone.
If the CIA was doing it in New York, imagine they were doing it in country after country around the world.
Well, if they had not
doing it in country after country around the world.
Well, if they had not killed Malcolm X, probably the Black Panther Party would not have evolved. I found these Declaration of Independence piece, that first 2 paragraphs that said, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for any one people to dissolve the political bondage which have connected them with another, when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursues and invariably evinces a design to reduce a people under absolute despotism. Well, this kind of phrasing, this kind of thinking, and our understanding, particularly the way I was coming from in my decisions to help to create this organization, was all about this need to change and alter the government, to evolve some community control kind of political power back into the hands of African American people in the black community. So we went down to the War on Poverty office, 3 blocks from my house. It's right there in North Oakland. And we sit down and decided right there by October 15th and start writing out this 10-point platform and program for this new organization.
Many people don't understand that the Black Panther Party's 10-point program and platform was basically a statement of principles. And it was around these principles that we organized in the black community.
Point 1 said we want power. We want power to determine the destiny of our own community. And it went through a series of issues.
We wanted decent housing. We wanted to determine the destiny of our community.
Decent education that taught us about our true history. We wanted fair treatment in the courts, juries of our peers.
We wanted to end to police brutality. We wanted a relevant education that taught us who we were and our role in society.
We wanted land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. We wanted to organize political, electoral, black community power.
The point was not to show the community how the community could empower itself and how the community could organize.
So we wrote this program, 10 points of what we want, then 10 collateral points of what we believe.
And these principles and stated objectives of the Black Panther Party were the heart of its program.
A pamphlet from the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. So I said, Huey, why they got this logo for this panther here? And another point that day, Huey said, you know, I think the nature of a panther is that if you push it in the corner, and if it can't go left and it can't go right, it's going to tend to come out that corner to wipe out the aggressor who pushed it in the corner in the first place. I said, that's what the racists have done, Huey. They didn't push us black folks into the corner. We decided to name it the Black Panther Party at first, and then we said, well, wait a minute, we're going to take a position on self-defense. So me and Huey agreed in the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So that was the night, October 22nd, the finalizing founding evening night. Because this is what happened. Huey was saying, okay, we're going to have some officers. So I flipped for chairman, a coin, a silver dollar. I flip, I say, heads, I'm chairman. Boom, it landed on heads. I say, I'm chairman. I go ready to hand Huey the silver dollar, and I pull back. I says, you don't need to flip. So Huey say, what do you mean I don't need to flip? I says, wait a minute, Huey. I says, only 2 of us. Oh, that's right. I said, you automatically minister defense. So I got Chairman. Yeah.
Huey and Bobby said we want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people. That was rampant in the Bay Area, all over the country.
It's always been a society of working class whites pitted against blacks. They had nothing else they could do but be police and try to come out of their Oklahoma Dust Bowl, I'm gonna kick your ass nigger kind of attitude.
There was an incident where a police had shot a black man in the back and then went and planted a gun next to him and said that the guy had drawn a gun on him, which we found out after investigation the guy didn't have no gun. Police had shot him in cold blood. Then they had another example where another black man was shot. But every young black man that was being shot during that time, the police never got indicted for murder or nothing. If anything, they got a promotion.
Oakland has one of the highest infant mortality rates among black people across the United States. Add to that miseducation, unemployment, police terror, and the rest. This all helped give rise to the Panther Party in that particular place at that time.
The real first patrol was down on 7th Street in West Oakland, California. We had 11 or 12 brothers that night.
Huey, Bobby, little Bobby Hutton, the Forte brothers, Sherman, who was also a part of that first cadre. And
a lot of people, man, because he's arresting somebody. We pull over, we park legally. We're 100 and some feet away. We all pile out the cars. We're a well-organized group, and we're observing the police under the law, and we're not going to take any crap from them if they do try something. But we want